After reading these statements, we find that there are two pairs that can be formed. That said, statement A is a very general statement, hence it's a floater. Let's process statement A at the end. First, we find that there is not a pair at least, but a sequence in C and D. C tells us for almost 100 years, AT&T accompanied the United States into the industrial age, enabling access to the most reliable communication system in the world. We see that in factors like, or in phrases like, for almost 100 years, AT&T accompanied the United States into the industrial age, enabling access to the most reliable communication system in the world. This statement is very much introductory of AT&T and its position, its value. So we first place C in the sequence. It seems like this would be the opening statement, but let's not decide that just yet. Next we look at statement D. In the 1970s, AT&T was the world's largest corporation. The company's $144 billion in assets was more than the gross national product of all about 20 countries. So from 100 years in 1970 is much more specific. Accompanied the United States, that is not directly mentioned here, but the world's largest corporation, that is sort of inferential, as in we can infer AT&T accompanying the United States or being the world's largest corporation here into the industrial age, that also connected here. And then the company's 144 billion in assets, more than the gross national product of all about 20 countries, that goes with the most reliable communication system in the world, which gave AT&T the position. So we don't know if C and D are consecutive statements, not yet, but we can tell that D would definitely come after C. So let's place D here. Let's leave a little space in between because there might be some other statements which come in between this. That said, we definitely find a pair in statements B and E. B says the company had evolved into a vertically integrated organization, providing what came to be known as end-to-end service. Notice the word service, and also the subject is the company. So the company is talking about AT&T. When C and D are more introductory of AT&T, B should come after these. And then we have statement E, which says AT&T long lines division provided long distance service. The 24 Bell operation companies offered local telephone service, and Bell Labs conducted research development. So this is talking about a service. The long lines division provided long distance service, and service has been introduced in B, end-to-end service, providing what came to be known as end-to-end service. Here we see that the aspect of service has been introduced. So B and E in that order essentially form a pair. So let's place B and E here. Now these are definitely consecutive statements. So we can place B and E together. Again, let's leave a little space between D and B because we don't know where A would fall yet. We'll see about that next. So now A says, as ubiquitous as the federal government, the company was seen as the definition of reliable and impenetrable. Now, we see that there are a few possibilities. If we didn't look at A at all, from the sequence that we have here, there are 4 places where A could be placed. We could have A here. We could have it here. We could have it here. And we could also have it at the very end, over here. Once this is done, now we look at the statement A. It says, as ubiquitous as the federal government, the company, as we see, has been introduced better. We find a better introduction in statement C. So the first thing that we can tell is we cannot place A before C because A talks about the company, referring to the company, and the company has been mentioned. AT&T has been mentioned in C. It has also been mentioned in some of the other statements, but C comes first in the sequence that we have devised. The leaving A out, barring A, we have the sequence as C, D, B, E. We don't know where A is yet, but according to that, we cannot have A before C. There's no possibility of that. Also, we cannot have A at the end because A is still talking about as ubiquitous as the federal government, the company was seen as the definition of reliable and impenetrable. Here, we are only talking about the company, while B and E are talking about services of the company. Services mentioned in B, exemplified in E. So we cannot have A at the end as well. Now, between these two positions, CAD, the possibilities being CAD or CDA, we have A better suited in this position here. And that is because we have the mention of, for almost 100 years, AT&T accompanied the United States into the industrial age. And then we see as ubiquitous as the federal government, ubiquitous, found everywhere, something extremely common, something extremely prevalent, something which can be found everywhere. So as ubiquitous as the federal government being more specific than just the mention of the United States, and also it accompanied the United States into the industrial age, enabling access to the most reliable communication system in the world, connected to, seen as the definition of reliable and impenetrable. And we see then that D talks about reliable and impenetrable, especially impenetrable, because we see AT&T was the world's largest corporation. The company's $144 billion in assets was more than the gross national product of all about 20 countries. Just imagine, the company had enough assets, as in it had more assets than the combined GNP of about 20 countries. So we see that this is talking about, if not reliable, most certainly the company being impenetrable. And as ubiquitous as the federal government, directly connects with C. So CAD has a better connection. If we do CDA, after D, let's clear this out a little bit. Now, after D says in the 1970s, AT&T was the world's largest corporation, etc. As ubiquitous as the federal government, first off, the connection with the United States accompanied the United States, that is broken. And then again, we have A referring to as ubiquitous as this, the company was the definition of reliable and impenetrable, all good. But then B said the company had evolved into a vertically integrated organization, providing what came to be known as end-to-end services. So we find that the connection between A and B, this connection is rather weak. In this, B at best functions like something of a change of argument, as in from the company being reliable and impenetrable, we have all of a sudden gone into a discussion of services. So we find that this position is much better as compared to this position. And hence, by that logic, we have placed A, the floater. So thus, we have determined that A comes between C and D in this position. And thus, we have our sequence ready. The correct answer is CADBE.